KCPS. I'm excited to be back to share another book with you. We've read so many books so far this year, and today we're going to read another one. Today we're going to read a book called Come On Rain. And while reading our book today, we're going to be thinking very closely about our characters Tess and Mama. And we're going to be thinking about two questions while we're reading today. We're going to be thinking about how does Tess and Mama respond when the weather is hot and dry? And how do Tess and Mama respond when the weather is wet and cold? So today when we're reading, make sure you're paying very close attention so we can stop and think and talk together. Come on, let's go read a book. All right, friends, let's get started with our book, Come On Rain by Karen Hess. Remember, when we're reading, we're going to pay very close attention to the characters' thoughts, actions, and words, and how they respond in the story. Come on, rain. Come on, rain, I say, squinting into the endless heat. Mama lifts a listless vine and sighs. 3 weeks and not a drop, she says, sagging over her parched plants. The sound of a heavy truck rumbles past. Uneasy, Mama looks over to me. Is that thunder, Tessie? She asks. Mama hates thunder. I climb up the steps for a better look. It's just a truck, Mama, I say. I am sizzling like a hot potato. I ask Mama, may I put on my bathing suit? Absolutely not, Mama says, frowning under her straw hat. You'll burn all day out in this sun. Up and down the block, cats pant. Heat wavers off the tar patches in the broiling alleyway. Ms. Grace and Miss Vera bend, tending beds of drooping vines. Not a sign of my friends Liz or Rosemary, not a peep from my pal Jackie Joyce. I stare out over rooftops, past chimneys, into the way off distance, and that's where I see it coming. Clouds rolling in, gray clouds, bunched and bulging under a purple sky.
Sorry, that was me. Can you repeat that? Sorry.
You okay?
There was too much noise there. Alright, we're going back to that same page, or at the top of the page where you were. Okay, here we go. 3, 2.
Up and down the block, cats pant. Heat wavers off tar patches in the broiling alleyway. Miss Grace and Miss Vera bend, tending beds of drooping vines. Not a sign of my friends Liz or Rosemary, not a peep from my pal Jackie Joyce. I stare out over rooftops, past chimneys, into the way off distance, and that's when I see it coming. Clouds rolling in. Gray clouds, bunched and bulging under a purple sky. A creeper of hope circles round my bones. Come on, rain, I whisper. Quietly, while Mama weeds, I cross the crackling dry path past Ms. Glick's window. Glancing inside, I hurry by. Ms. Glick's needle sticks on her phonograph, playing the same notes over and over in the dim, stuffy cave of her room. The smell of hot tar and garbage bullies the air as I climb the steps to Jackie Joyce's porch. Jackie Joyce, I breathe, pressing my nose against her screen. Jackie Joyce comes to the door. Her long legs, like 2 brown string beans, sprout from her shorts. It's going to rain, I whisper. Put on your suit and come straight over. Slick with sweat, I run back home and slip up the steps past Mama. She is nearly senseless in the sizzling heat, kneeling over the hot rump of a melon. In the kitchen, I pour iced tea into the top of a tall glass. I aim a spoonful of sugar into my mouth and then a second into the drink. Got you some tea, Mama, I say, pulling her inside the house. Mama sinks onto a kitchen chair and sweeps off her hat. Sweat trickles down her neck and wets the front of her dress and under her arms. Mama presses the ice-chilled glass against her skin. Aren't you something, Tessie, she says. I nod smartly. Rain's coming, Mama, I say. Mama turns to the window and sniffs. It's about time, she murmurs. How are Mama and Tessa feeling because of the dry, hot weather? How are they feeling? Sweaty, sizzling, maybe a little sad, maybe tired. Jackie Joyce in her bathing suit knocks at the door and I let her in. Jackie Joyce has her suit on, Mama, I say. May I wear mine too? I hold my breath waiting. A breeze blows in the thin curtains into the kitchen, then sucks them back against the screen again. Is there thunder? Mama asks. No thunder, I say. Is there lightning? Mama asks. No lightning, Jackie Joyce says. You stay where I can find you, Mama says. We will, I say, Well, go on then, Mama says, lifting the glass to her lips to take a sip. Come on, Rain, I cheer, peeling out of my clothes and into my soup, while Jackie Joyce runs to get Liz and Rosemary. We meet in the alleyway. All the insects have gone still. Trees sway under a swollen sky. The wind grows bold and bolder. And just like that, rain comes. The first drop plops down big, making dust dance all around us. Then a deeper gray descends, and the air cools and the clouds burst. And suddenly rain is everywhere. Come on, rain, we shout. It streams through our hair and down our backs. It freckles our feet, glazes our toes. We turn in circles, glistening in our rain skin. Our mouths wide, we gulp down rain. Jackie Joyce chases Rosemary, who chases Liz, who chases me. Wet, slicking our arms and legs, we splash up the block, squealing and whooping in the streaming rain. How do the characters feel in the wet weather? We see that they're changing a little bit. Now they're happy, they're dancing, they're singing. We make such racket, Miss Gliz rushes out on her porch. Miss Grace and Miss Vera come next, and then comes Mama. They run from their kitchens and skid to a stop. Leaning over their rails, they turn to each other. A smile spreads from porch to porch, and with a wordless nod, first one, then all. Fling off their shoes, skim off their hose, tossing streamers of stockings over their shoulders, our bare-legged mamas dance down the steps and join us in the fresh, clean rain, while the music from Miss Glick's phonograph shimmies and sparkles and streaks like night lightning. Jackie Joyce, Liz, Rosemary, and I, we grab the hands of our mamas. We twirl and sway them, tromping through puddles, romping and reeling in the moisty green air. We swing our wet and wild-haired mamas till we're all laughing under trinkles of silver rain. I hug Mama's hand and she hugs me back. The rain has made us new, and the clouds move off. I trace the drips on Mama's face. Everywhere, everyone, everything is misty limbs springing back to life. We sure did get a soaking, Mama, I say, and we headed home, purely soothed, fresh as dew, turning toward the first sweet rays of the sun. The end. What a great story we just read. I just love all the words the author uses in this book. And today we're going to use some of those words to help us answer our question today. So our first question is, how do Mama and Tess respond to the hot, dry weather? So I want to go back into the story and I want to think about the beginning part of my story, when we know the weather was hot and dry. And we notice that the author uses words like sweating, sizzling, sagging, squinting. So how do Tess and Mama respond when it's hot and dry? I remember that when it was hot and dry, in the hot, dry weather, Mama and Tess are sweating, squinting, and tired. So at the beginning in our story, when it's hot and dry, they're sweating, they're squinting, they're tired. But then, how do Mama and Tess respond to the cold, wet weather? Remember, we have a change in the weather. We go from hot and dry to cold and wet. So how do they respond when it's cold and wet? We see dancing and running. We see singing. We see the mamas come off the porches and come and dance with the kids, right? So how they respond to the cold, wet weather? In the cold, wet weather, Mama and Tess are laughing, singing, and dancing. So when we were thinking about how our characters respond and change, we're using the illustrations, we're using all of our picture clues, our illustrations, and we're using the words that the author is saying. Always Tess is saying, "Come on, rain," and then the author is using words to help paint a picture in our mind. So when you're reading stories with your mom and dad or your brothers and sisters, be thinking about what are the characters thinking, what are they feeling, what are they doing, and how do they respond when something happens in the story. I'll be back to share another book with you, and I can't wait to see you again soon. Bye, KCPS!
Good morning. My name is Sherry Easton and welcome back. We are ready to start a session on ELA for 3rd through 6th grade. So let's get started. Today we're going to share the book Twice as Good, written by Richard Mickelson, and it's illustrated by Eric Velasquez. I love this book. It's a true story and it has great illustrations, so I chose it for our work today. We've been thinking lately about characters and how they're motivated, or characters, how they all have thoughts, they have things they're thinking. We the reader know those thoughts, and how characters make certain choices in their actions. They do certain things, and that those thoughts and actions move the plot along. So we've been talking about that. Today I want to talk about something else that characters have besides actions, dialogue, their words they speak, and monologue, the thinking they have in their brain, right? Besides those three things, characters also have what we call motivations. Motivation means that you are inspired to do or get something or be something, right? You're motivated to achieve something, right? So characters all want something. They're all motivated by a need or a want, right? Every narrative that we read, every story we read, the characters want or need something, and that motivates them. And those motivations change the way the character acts, right? That changes their actions. So when we read Twice as Good today, we're going to look at the motivations of the main character. The main character's name is Willie. So we're going to look to answer two questions. The first one is, what is Willie's biggest motivation? What does he want more than anything, right? And then how are his actions guided by his motivations? So in other words, what are those motivations? How do they change the way Willie behaves in the story? So let's see if we can figure out his motivation in Twice as Good. Twice as Good. Willie Powell was fast. He was only in the 3rd grade, but he was already faster and could run across the playground way faster than most 5th graders could. But the new golf course was 7 miles outside of town, and he'd promised his mother he would be home before dark. He was fast, but it was a long way. Edgewater Golf Course was the most beautiful sight Willie's eyes had ever seen. The lawns were as smooth as carpets, the brightest green. Willie approached 2 golfers. "Can you teach me to play?" he asked the kinder-looking of the men. "Son, didn't anyone ever tell you that your kind is not welcome here?" the man answered. Now we already know his motivation, right? Imagine he wants to learn to play golf, and he wants it so badly that he's willing to be brave enough to ask 2 strangers if they would help him play, right? That's some strong motivation. They said no. They said no because his kind's not welcome here, which makes me think that they're saying no because he's black, so he can't play golf at Edgewater Golf Course. Let's see how that changes his motivation or his actions. Willie's eyes wanted to cry, but he wouldn't let them, not there. Of course, Willie knew he was different. He was the only Negro in his class. That's an old-fashioned word. It means someone who has black skin. It was dark when Willie got home. He hoped his mother would be asleep, but nope, she was waiting by the front door. First, she hugged Willie tight, and then she told him, "Now you go get me a good whippy switch from one of the willows." Willie knew he deserved a switching, but even now he was planning to sneak back to the new golf course every single chance he got. Getting in trouble wasn't going to stop Willie. See how strong his motivation is? Getting in trouble's not going to stop him. He's going to get what he wants, and he wants to learn how to play golf, right? "You back again, son?" It was the same man who'd mocked Willie weeks before. "You may as well learn to caddy if you're going to be here every day." That means you can carry my clubs." He handed Willie a leather bag filled with 14 sticks carved from thick hickory wood. It was heavy, but Willie already knew he'd have to work twice as hard as the other caddies, even if the bags were heavy. His school principal had told him, "If you're going to get ahead in this world, Willie, you can't be as good as the white children. You have to be twice as good." See how unfair the world is? Still is sometimes, right? It's our job to make it as fair as we can, but for right now, Willie's working in a world that's not fair. But the following year, Willie was being paid 35 cents per bag to caddy. He liked jingling the money in his pocket. That would make me feel good too. Can you imagine? He'd caddy every summer day and study how the better players hit the ball. He'd caddy listen to that, every single day, and he'd study how the players hit the ball. So he's always motivated by his motivation to learn to golf. Then he'd hike to Dr. Casey's house where his mother worked, answering the phone and writing down the doctor's appointments. One day, Dr. Casey called Willie into his office. "I hear you like to golf, young man," he said. "Yes, sir," Willie answered. "Well, then," the doctor said, "tomorrow you can play the course with me." Willie woke up before the sun and raced the whole way to Edgewater. Now, imagine waking up before the sun. See how motivated he is? How excited he is? When he saw Dr. Casey's car, he hurried over and swung the doctor's golf bag over his shoulder. "Hold on, wait a minute. I asked you to play, young man, not to caddy," Dr. Casey said, and he handed Willie his own set of clubs. Willie knew it was rare for a white man to help a young black child. But he couldn't, almost dropped the book. Willie knew it was rare for a white man to help a young black child, but he couldn't think of a single word to say. Thank you just didn't seem enough. Finally, Willie just set his ball on the first tee and took a swing. The ball rose like a shooting star high into the sky. So Dr. Casey does something that really finally teaches him how to play golf, right? Oh, he got his motivation. Now let's see what he's motivated by. Willie practiced every chance he got, and by the time he entered Minerva High, he was the best golfer in the whole school. Willie was proud to be named team captain, and he sure was that if he got the chance to compete, he could win in a local tournament. So one morning, Willie hitchhiked 21 miles to Orchard Hill Golf Course. The judges never expected a Negro to enter the competition, so they hadn't actually forbidden it in the rules. Willie had caddied for many of the Orchard Hills members, and they all liked him, but now they looked away and wouldn't look at his eyes, like they were kind of feeling guilty. Right? "Let the boy play," he finally heard one of the men say. It was the man he'd first caddied for years before. So he's finally going to get to play. Let's see. Willie's hands started to sweat. He was so nervous he could barely hold the club, but he took a deep breath and walked to the first tee. By the time he got to the 15th fairway, Willie was leading the field, and it seemed like the whole town was watching him. His next drive was heading straight for the pin, but on the way down, his ball nicked the skinniest of a twig hanging off of a huge maple tree, and it came to rest in the knee-high grass. "That'll teach his kind to play on our course," he heard someone say. Willie finished third, but he didn't give up. "I'll just have to work twice as hard the next time," he promised himself. Still motivated. Wants to be the best golfer, right? Motivated. First he was motivated by wanting to learn to play. Now he wants to be the best, right? He's willing to get up early. He's willing to work hard. He's willing to practice all day. All of those actions are guided by his motivation. And Willie did keep working hard. He went to college, married his sweetheart Marcella, and went looking for a steady factory job. But America was at war, and soon Willie was drafted into the Army. Willie put on his uniform and hugged Marcella goodbye. He was Sergeant William Powell now, and he had to sail across the ocean to England. Sometimes Willie had to work all day and night at the Army base, but whenever he had time off, Willie would play golf. It seemed like every town in England had a course, and the local people were always polite. Nobody seemed to think that golf was just for white people. Willie had never enjoyed playing golf more, but after 3 years, he was thankful when the war was finally over, because he missed Marcella, and he couldn't wait to sail home. So even though he's free to golf anywhere he wants in England, he misses his family, right? I wonder if he can make it free to golf anywhere in America. Maybe that's his biggest motivation. He wants everybody in America to be able to golf like they can in other countries like England. Let's see. Willie was glad to be back in America, and best of all, Marcella was soon pregnant. She had been dreaming about having a daughter. Willie had been dreaming too. His dream was to be a professional golfer, and his welcome overseas made him think it was possible. So I'm going to read that again because that tells us a little bit about his motivation, right? Listen to it one more time. Willie had been dreaming too. His dream was to be a professional golfer, and his welcome overseas made him think it was possible. So now we know he's motivated to be a professional golfer. He wants to play for real, for the pros. Professional means to play for money, right? So you get paid as a job to do it instead of just do it as a hobby. So he wants to be able to be a professional golfer where that's his job. But Willie heard the same story at every course he visited that year. Only members are allowed to play here. You can only be a member if you're white. And you're a little too old to caddy, son. Sorry. Every place. Some folks don't mind me fighting for their freedom, he told Marcella, but they sure don't mind me sharing their golf clubhouse. I mean, he's got a point, right? Now we can tell he has a family, right? So let's see if his motivations change now that he has a family. But today, nothing could upset Willie. He was playing with his baby daughter, Renee. She grabbed his finger and held it tight. "You have the grip of a champion golfer," he told her. Marcella laughed. "But Renee's a girl," she reminded Willie. "I know she's a girl," Willie answered. "She'll just have to try twice as hard as the boys do." "And she's black," Marcella said. "I know she's black," Willie answered. "She'll just have to try twice as hard as the white folks do." Then Willie gave Renee a big kiss and held her up high. "Someday there will be a course where you'll never be turned away," he told her. Maybe he's motivated to make that course. What do you think? Let's see if that motivation changes his actions. The next afternoon, Willie and Marcella were driving past their favorite farmland when they saw a wooden sign. Willie stopped the car and got out. He strolled right past the chicken coops, the milking barns, the silos, and even the sweet potato patch. There were rolling hills, and he had a clear view in every direction. "From right here," he told himself, "I can see right into the future." Willie knew the government was lending former soldiers money called GI loans. It was helping them buy houses. So he went to his local bank where his friends had gotten their loans. But the bankers had never expected a Negro to ask for money, so they all liked Willie. They all knew Willie. Sometimes they golfed as his caddy, with Willie as the caddy, but now they looked away from him. Wouldn't look him in the eye. Willie wouldn't give up. He'd just have to try twice as hard to raise the money. He finally convinced 2 local doctors to help him buy the land. For 2 years, Willie worked at the local factory from 3 in the afternoon until 11 at night to support his family. And at the first crack of dawn, he'd head out to dig, weed, mow, plant, and water. Then work until it was time to leave again for the factory. The harder Willie worked, the better he felt. "Your daddy is putting the fair back in fairway," Marcella told Renee. "He's a groundbreaker and you'll be one too." And then she laughed because Willie was out digging in the ground again. What she'd meant was that William Powell was ahead of his time. In April 1948, Clearview Golf Club was ready to open. He opened his own golf club. Nice. "This course for colored people only, or can I play too?" someone shouted from the road. Willie recognized the man he'd caddied for when he was 9 years old. "This here is America's course," Willie told him. He answered proudly, "The only color that matters here is the color of the greens. The brightest green." Clearview had been open for 1 year when Renee was turning 3 years old, and Willie gave her a small golf club for her birthday. It fit perfectly in her tiny hands. As Renee grew up, she didn't care that some folks thought Negroes shouldn't be allowed to play golf, and she didn't care that some folks thought girls shouldn't be allowed to play golf. Renee fell in love with the game. "Come in for dinner," Marcella called. "I'm not done practicing," Renee answered. "I need to try twice as hard if I'm going to be a champion." Willie gave his daughter a big hug. "You already are my champion," he told her. Renee hugged her daddy back. She felt twice as good as she'd ever felt before, being Willie Powell's daughter. And at the end, it says the rest of the story, and it tells you a little bit more about Willie Powell, because it's a true story. So in 1948, Willie Powell became the first person to open a golf course that was open to all people, regardless of their color. And we can tell how he was motivated by those actions, or his actions were changed by his motivations, right? What is Willie's biggest motivation? It was to open a golf course that would be where anyone could play, right? That was his biggest motivation. And then how were his actions guided by his motivations? He was willing to get up early. He was willing to work super hard. He was willing to try twice as hard and be twice as good as everyone else, all the white golfers, so that he would be able to make his motivations, right? So now, from whenever we read, readers, we're going to think about 4 things now. We're going to think about the author's actions, or not the author, the character's actions, the character's thinking, the character's words, and the character's motivation. What does the character want most of all? Happy reading, guys. See you next time.
Kansas City. Welcome to another ELA Tuesday. I'm Chris Odom. I'm your ELA coordinator for Kansas City Public Schools. We're going to continue our series on poetry today and continue to explore the work of Elizabeth Acevedo in this awesome narrative poetry collection called The Poet X. And she won a national award for this novel. And what's really fun is we've been using it to explore quite a few things, and hopefully you maybe have got excited about it enough to want to find a copy on your own. So it's out there and it's a great text. You can find resources related to this book online, and that's where I'm pulling some of this information also. So let's start with the quote from her. Today we're going to talk about theme. And this quote says, "I only know that learning to believe in the power of my own words has been the most freeing experience of my life. It has brought me the most light. And isn't that what a poem is? A lantern glowing in the dark." So that's a pretty cool way to start us off today. You might start thinking about what would the theme be of that statement? Okay, so again, this is Elizabeth Acevedo, and we've been featuring her work for about 4 of these sessions in a row now in this same text, and we're kind of exploring the story that's coming out as we go. We're going to use it today to talk about theme. Some of her background is definitely in poetry and performance, so you can hear that in the voice that's featured in this. If you really like poetry yourself, you might check out this contest that's available in Kansas City. See if your teacher knows about it. Ask them about poetryoutloud.org. It's a great contest. In fact, I think Acevedo participated as a judge in the past herself. So it's a really big national chance to get involved with poetry. Okay, so today we're going to talk about theme and get a definition going. We're going to hear about 5 poems out of this book, and then to those poems we're going to apply our definition of theme. This is a pretty basic image up here, and it might be a little bit harder to see exactly what's here, but let's go to the next screen and see if we can use it as a point of discussion. So the theme is the underlying meaning of a literary work. Often theme is more likely to be found in something literary, like a story or a poem, because the theme is something that the author develops over time. And there's often more than one theme in a longer book, like a novel. There might be one major theme in a smaller work, like a poem or a short story. So it's also a good concept to think about just the big idea. This has been helpful when I explain it to students to think about when you were reading this or you were watching this, what was really the big idea that they were trying to get across from the author or the movie maker's point of view. Let's look at this picture. What do you think the big idea that comes from all of these images might be? And so to do so, you're going to have to kind of interpret and think about the significance and kind of how they all talk to each other to come to one meaning. So what exactly do you think this is trying to talk about? I'm really puzzled by what looks like a USB device connected to a basketball. That's really cool. But again, it would make me have to think about it. I see things related to graphs. This is a cup of coffee, I think. I don't know really here. Some kind of a animal that doesn't seem to be alive, right? And maybe a cow and some horns. And then definitely this stands out, right? So what would you decide the theme might be that goes with all of this detail together? To me, it seems like making a living or figuring out what it takes, I guess, to do what you do and all the components that might equal maybe like a life in business, right? Maybe so. So all that speaks to one big topic if we try to figure it out. Okay, another possible term you've heard related to theme is the moral. And stories that are intended to have a lesson often do so like a fable, but sometimes that might not have been the goal of the author. And so instead we would talk about the theme and what prevailed and what came across the most. We don't know necessarily that the author was trying to introduce us to a moral or teach us a lesson. Okay, so in that same way, it's a good word to remember because it helps you think about often a story has a moral or something big we take away. So it's possible that that might be related to the theme. Okay, we're getting done with some definitions. So we're really going to go ahead and decide what the theme is based on a few of the poems that I have pre-selected in The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. Let me page in here and find my first pages that are green. You'll notice I'm starting to keep colors because we've used the poems in the past to teach other things like setting. And then this week, I've got my green tabs to tell me that these are for theme. Okay. It's like the first green tab. The poem is called The Routine. So before we really get into this poem called The Routine, let's just look ahead a smidge and see at the questions that we might think about while we're reading. Okay, first one, who are these poems about? We might even decide like who they are about. I think they're going to be about some people in her life. But you might also think with the word, what are these poems about? Before we get any deeper, right? Just what's going on? Number two, what's the big idea? Donald Duck over here used to say that, I think, and I'm not going to try that voice. I was practicing a little bit, but if you want to try your Donald Duck voice, ask each other, what's the big idea, right? So what details helped you guess the big idea as I'm reading these poems? Okay, just like we did with the picture. And then wonder about this. What is the poet suggesting about life or the human experience, right? Which is really fun to start talking about with young people, because the older you get, the more you really see and know about what that word human experience really means, right? It's fun to discuss. Okay, and then we're going to make a prediction. What theme will we hear more about as the book goes on? And then really what makes you guess that? Because now you're starting to be an active reader and participate in the unfolding story, right? And the narrative that's starting to happen as we read this text together. Okay, and then after we're done, we're going to apply what we're talking about here, maybe to another book you can find yourself, right? So find a book you like, read on it for a bit, and then stop and jot a prediction about the theme. Talk to your friend, ask them what they're reading. Try this together at home. And then as you continue to read, if that was the prediction you made, see if when you read on, it confirms your hypothesis about what this big idea really is. Okay, so I'm going to pull us back to question 1, and let's just center on that one while we talk about first poem called The Routine. The routine is the same every school year. I go straight home after school, and since mommy says that I'm la niña de la casa, it's my job to help her out around the house. So after school, I eat an apple, my favorite snack, wash dishes, and sweep. Dust around mommy's altar to la Virgin Maria, to avoid papi's TV if he's home, because he hates when I clean in front of it while he's trying to watch La Noticias or a Red Sox game. It's one of the few things Twin and I argue about, how he never has to do half the cleaning I do, but is still better liked by Mommy. He helps me when he's home, folds the laundry, or scrubs the tub, but he won't get in trouble if he doesn't. I hear one of Mommy's famous sayings in my ear, Mira muchacha, life ain't fair. That's why we have to earn our entrance into heaven. Okay, it's fun to read these poems with you in the morning. Those last lines, they're impossible to ignore for me because I'm a definite poetry lover. Okay, so that was called The Routine. What was that about? Stop for a minute and just kind of think about it. You got the title to start with as a way to make some guesses, right? But what is the routine? And what is her routine like, right? And then what's the big idea associated with why she would tell us about her routine, right? That would take some explaining. So what's really neat is a theme really isn't a word. A theme is something you can explain with a sentence or two, and then with some details of how you came to that conclusion. Okay, let's try it again. And this one's called Altar Boy. Twin is easier for Mommy to understand. He likes church. As much of a science geek as he is, he doesn't question the Bible the way that I do. He's been an altar boy since he was 8. Could quote the New Testament in Spanish and English since he was 10. Leads discussions at Bible study even better than the priest. No disrespect to Father Sean. He even volunteered at the Bible camp this summer. And now that school started, he'll miss the stations of cross dioramas his campers make from popsicle sticks, the stick figure drawings of Mary in the manger, the mosaic made of marbles that he hung in the window of our room. The one that I threw out this afternoon while I was cleaning, watched it fall between the fire escape grates. For a second, it caught the sun in 100 colors until it smashed against the street. I'll apologize to Twin later, say it was an accident. He'll forgive me. He'll pretend to believe me. Pretty interesting, right? So she's getting into some topics that may be very personal, and it seems like that might be one of the themes, and to talk about her experience and her relationship with, it sounds like, religion and the way that that is part of her family, right? So again, a really interesting theme that sometimes we may not bring into school much for good reason, but it's also something you can explore by reading a book a little bit about a character that an author is developing, right? Who needs somewhere to talk about some of these things also. Okay, so what details might have helped you guess a big idea in either of the two poems we just said, right? Let's really focus on that one in this poem. It's called More About Twin. Although Twin is older by almost an hour, of course the birth got complicated when it was my turn, he doesn't act older. He is years softer than I will ever be. When we were little, I would come home with bleeding knuckles, and Mommy would gasp and shake me. Muchacha, siempre peleando. Why can't you be a lady? Or like your brother. He never fights. This is not God's way. And Twin's eyes would meet mine across the room. I never told her he didn't fight because my hands became fists for him. My hands learned how to bleed when other kids tried to make him into a wound. My brother was birthed a soft whistle, quiet, barely stirring the air, a gentle sound, but I was born all the hurricane he needed to lift and drop those that hurt him to the ground. Wow. All right. So there's some really neat details in there, some things about perhaps her relationship and where her feelings about her identity come from as she is a twin, how they are much different, and then how that helps us really understand thematically the big idea that maybe the author is talking about just in this one poem. And perhaps it could be about how she is there for him and knows her place in this world as it relates to his place in this world. And it doesn't seem like she wants him to have to be the knuckle person, right? With the bleeding knuckles. It seems like she's excited to maybe realize her own identity as it relates to her twin and provide that part when they need it. Okay, so let's keep thinking. We've got really, I think, this final poem. And this poem, interesting enough, we're up to the date in the book that says Tuesday, September 11th. So historically, the poet would know that date very significantly herself. And it's called It's Only the First Week of 10th Grade. Okay, let's explore the next question through this poem. What is the poet suggesting about life or the human experience? And in this case, it might be life in school, right? It's only the first week of 10th grade, and high school is already a mess. In 9th grade, you're in between, no longer in junior high, but still treated like a kid. In 9th grade, you're always frozen between trying not to smile or cry until you learn that no one cares about what your face does, only what your hands will do. I thought 10th grade would be different, but I still feel like a lone shrimp in a stream where too many are searching for someone with a soft shell to peel apart and crush. Today, I already had to curse a guy out for pulling on my bra strap, and then shoved a senior into a locker for trying to whisper into my ear. We know what girls like you want, they say, and I'm disgusted at myself, the slight excitement that shivers up my back. At the same time, I wish I could fold into the tiniest corner for me to hide in. Okay, again, this book is something about a 8th or 9th grade level and intended in that way, and you can see how it's giving such topics a chance to probably find their way into conversations between students. So as far as social emotional learning goes, instead of hiding some of these conversations, we really are working on incorporating those into our day-to-day discussions and our life and inside of school, as long as students feel that they are comfortable and have some maturity as they apply to these topics. So please know that that's why this is probably such a powerful book right now, and why it's winning such high acclaim from so many people, is that we know we all need to talk about these topics and learn about them in our youth, so we're best prepared to know who we are and where we stand on so many different issues. And there's so many ways that we can explore that, and one way might be just in our own private reading of a book. So what do you think that last poem, talking about the challenges of being in, I guess, the second week, is that what she said, or the first week of school? And I think the title tells us it's only the first week of 10th grade, right? So just that alone, what does that suggest? Is that already there's been so much to deal with, and just coming back to experiencing what it means to be back really takes on a whole new job for this character as she pursues her decisions about what it's going to be like this year. Certainly the way she's being pestered and bothered by people, and her reactions to that, and what it means to kind of make those decisions, and who she might turn to for advice as she's growing up. So these kind of books about growing up are a great thing to read long after you yourself have grown up, because it helps you remember that there's a lot of questions out there going around that everyone needs some time and chance to perhaps discuss with a peer, or and sometimes even an adult. Okay, so the fourth question: what theme do you think we'll hear more about as the book goes on? What have you heard about that you figure will likely come back up as we read more? And I have a guess that a lot of it will be about identity. I have some feelings that it'll have some thoughts about her family and her relationship with her twin, right? And certainly then her own relationship, which makes us really think about how much students don't talk about that, with spirituality and some form of religion that doesn't necessarily need for us to discuss it in specific, but for her to see that that is a part of what she does and part of her life. It seems like this is also going to give a discussion as a chance for not everyone in her family is going to see this topic in the same way. So very interesting, and we're not very far into the book, really only on page 46, and there's a whole world that is already starting to be revealed. So I hope that has helped you think a little bit, and when you're looking for a book, go ahead and jot a prediction about what you think the theme is. And then as you continue to read, maybe you find some additional ones. And if you read something together with a friend, it's a really good thing to talk about along the way. Okay, I'm Chris Odom. This has been another segment of ELA Tuesday on KCPS Homeroom. We've been talking about theme today and the great work of Elizabeth Acevedo in a book called The Poet X. Thanks again. Have a great day.
Kansas City, and welcome to another edition of KCPS Homeroom. I am Chris Odom, your English coordinator for the Kansas City Public Schools, and today I am joined by a wonderful student of the past who came out of Paseo Academy. It was really, exciting to work there for the years I did, and kept meeting more and more people I imagined would go off to do things. I'm in a really neat situation, having taught younger in my life. Is really I get to see how people are going to use what they did with their time in school. And lately I've been following up with some people, and Rachel's here to talk to us a little bit about her experiences that have come from some of her work that may have confirmed it when she was working as an earlier student that you might be right now. So I know as young people, you're really kind of trying to weigh your options for your paths. And it's really helpful sometimes to hear from people who have gone through that process and kind of can lead you a little bit. So I'm going to ask Rachel to go ahead and introduce herself and tell us a little bit about an update from her. I honestly haven't seen her since what year did you graduate?
2007, I
Wow.
think.
Yeah. So yeah, I started teaching in 2001 and really finished out my teaching in the classroom in like 2016. So you're right there in that
Yeah, right in the thick
part.
of it.
Right. Okay, well, yeah, give us an update.
Yeah, so essentially I am a freelance social media strategist and content creator. I work in the fandom space. You might be familiar with some of the franchises that I specialize in: DC, Marvel, Star Wars. They're just some tiny names that are in the industry for a little. Nobody's. But yeah. So essentially, I do content creation and offer commentary on these franchises, as well as video essays, and really just like critical thinking as far as the creation process for film and comics and animation and anything that really kind of like entertains in the internet space. So that's basically what I do. I just kind of, and it's freelance, so I kind of control my own schedule and basically work for myself. So I get to set my own pay rate, which is pretty nice, and I get to do what I love. So I never really work a day in my life anymore. So yeah.
Awesome. So what, if you could unwind your path and kind of go back to how you got to that point, can you give it some of the steps coming all the way back from the days that you were walking out of Paseo?
Yeah, so graduating from high school, I was pretty stressful just because my father actually had a stroke that year that I was, dealing with privately. So it was very touch and go. And the fact that he was able to attend was huge, because we didn't know if he was going to, make it. So there was that. And, that's it. So that kind of already like rocks, just the, not really like your college experience, but just like you have that hesitation really, it's just like, do I need to do this right now? Do I need to be with my family? Like, basically like if your family is telling you go, you know what I'm saying? Seize the opportunity, and own it, because you do not know when and if there is going to be enough space time for you to seize the opportunity again. It's okay if you don't know what you want to do yet. Just know what you're passionate about. Love those things. Don't be afraid to love them, because it really can evolve if you give yourself enough time into something. I literally graduated high school. I went into like art school. I went into the Art Institute. I, dabbled over at Columbia in Chicago. And then I finally landed at the Carter Art Center in Penn Valley, so I could just be closer to home. And yeah, I dabbled in radio broadcasting. I thought I wanted to do journalism. It really wasn't it, just because I loved research, but I didn't like, being told, like what I needed to cover. I didn't like having a boss. So went back to school, learned more skills, these hobbies, like making little edits, about my favorite comic book characters, or, doing like a live stream on Instagram, to talk to people about like the latest comic polls that they did this week. This all caring, researching, investing in these brands, these franchises, it taught me a lot about business as far as like customer demand, how much power, viewers and consumers really have, like as far as influence on IP and on intellectual property. And then it also kind of really didn't like make me want to like sell out, but it really made me want to be a part of something big that had just like built like a monolith, on fanaticism in a sense, where it's just like, just people being like really passionate and willing to throw money, away at something, and the way that they reward that consumption, that is something that is so fascinating to me. So through all this research, through all of these jobs that I took, doing all of these things that I didn't want to do, I found a way to basically create a consumable that adds value to people's lives and gives them confidence every day to really just pursue their passions, and live essentially against the grain, which, Chris, you kind of encourage us to do that, like as kids pretty early on. You had 2 rules. Don't be afraid to go against the grain and make yourself available to inspiration. I have lived and died by those words, like time and time again over the last like 13 years. So it's just, don't be afraid to be yourself, because if you're not afraid to stand out, it makes people it just makes it easier for people to, one, see you and really just like invest in you as an authority. Like, just love what you love, become an expert in it, you know what I'm saying, and see where that takes you, because it didn't always pay off, at the beginning, but nothing really does at the beginning. That's why the beginnings are the hardest. So it's just like, it's just starting to now, and it's, yeah. I'm
That's
exhausted.
fantastic. Yeah, it's fantastic, and how fun to hear my own rules. Or really, those aren't even rules that I would have created, but was like harvesting that I got out of going to the creative writing program at UMKC.
Yeah.
And they were interesting because they were mostly grown-ups making rules for each other about art. And I developed it. I think I still know it. It's like a 23 rule checklist that
Yep.
I don't know if it was complete or in what stage, but yeah, that one about being available when inspiration comes, that was somebody else's, obviously. That
No, it's crucial. And one of the most rewarding things that I do is being able to facilitate a space. So, people who essentially use like the IPs that I'm supporting basically is like escapism, like they're just trying to escape reality.
Right.
And so a lot of the triggers and, the hangups that they have, from their day to day, they're just very desperate, to get away from. And some people don't all nerd the same way. Others who use it to escape use it to reinforce, their status quo. So it's very important, to have conversations about, how these things are structured, how reality, outside of internet, like time, how it contributes and really feeds in, and inspires these pieces that are created. Wow. To that we're currently having this conversation over. So it's like it is really sad to me that especially in the last 5 years, people have been so terrified to really kind of talk about political motivation and, identity politics and civics, the things that really just kind of like motivate us to function as like a society. Because in my world, in my line of work, a lot of these pieces were created and inspired by the times, you know what I'm saying, to create conversation. And now the exact opposite is happening because of there's just, I think, an intimidation factor of too much information available. So when I get to see people just kind of break those barriers down, have the conversation, do the work, it is the best, because it's like I'm getting my childhood, fantasy, just like I'm living in that world, but it's being fully contextualized through the identity and the framing that like I need, via the community that I'm supporting. And it's fabulous. So no, I'm glad that you're using the platform that you have to really, do what you can to shine light on those who are, systemically, being oppressed and would not have as much success otherwise. So like, good on you for that.
Well, thank you.
For sure.
And by no means is that, just a singular motivation. There's like you're saying, this is a complex time. I think the best thing to do is just like get involved and explore what this could be. But who knows, these little conversations are so dynamic and fascinating. And I would love people to watch them and then have their own conversations, or, start something like this. So anybody you could reach out and have a conversation with anybody that we're gonna send up to something else for another possibility. So
Mhm.
these are the kind of things I want to start doing more of, and I appreciate you being part of it. I think it's been exciting to reflect with students just in general, and it's even more exciting that you're hitting the niche area that really seems like it's giving you back all the joy of doing it. So props on that. That is like the ultimate goal of getting yourself out there and taking that chance. And thanks again for all the hopeful words and encouragement to the young writers and business people and entrepreneurs and all the many different revenue streams that you can find at once, right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen amazing lists of things Paseo students do, and they're doing them simultaneously, sometimes multiple ways to serve one event, to be the photographer, the DJ, the caterer in some senses. Like I think Brandon does like everything. Which Brandon? There's a couple of Brandons. I don't know.
I think I know which one.
Brandon Butler?
Yes.
My gosh. I don't know how many, if you're calling those revenue streams, man. Like, it's pretty cool. He's all over the world. I see him in music videos and his own music videos and right, selling things on Facebook that he cooked the night before like a chef, and just awesome. This is a different world. So thanks again, Rachel. We'll sign off. You want to leave them with any closing words? We're going to close down for KCPS Homeroom on ELA Tuesday.
Absolutely. Just whatever you do, just stay present, stay aware, you know what I'm saying, and keep an eye open, you know what I'm saying? Like, we live in a world where there are no breaks. So it's just, if you can stay aware and you can stay present, hold out as long as you can. It's rewarding. Trust me.
Very good. Take it from Rachel. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day.